you can trick yourself sometimes into thinking that you need to have the answer at all times and that you have to be somebody that already has a knowledge of everything.
Right.
But I think that it's important that even as you grow in your positions of mentorship, that you still are asking lots of questions and that you're still really trying to lead from places of curiosity sometimes as opposed to just initiative. I think, and so we came up with the DASH. We call it
Yeah.
the DASH because you have your birth date, then you have your death date, and then the dash that's right in between those two things. To me, that's like the
Everything that
span of your
matters.
life. That's your life.
Right.
Life is the dash.
Ooh,
And
that's
everything
beautiful.
that we make and create is centered around some form of the things that we see, experience, and live through.
What's up, coaches? Welcome to Your Coach's Coach. I am your host, Coach Justin Blackwell. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a NASM certified personal trainer, a boxing coach, as well as a father of two, based out here in Los Angeles, California. I created this podcast to help you gain insight on how successful coaches, both established and up and coming, have navigated and continue to navigate their world of sports, fitness, and movement. You're going to hear some really raw stories and some really incredible journeys on this podcast, and I hope you find this podcast valuable, useful, and entertaining. If you do, please like, subscribe, and share. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode.
First and foremost, I just want to welcome you to Your Coach's Coach. I'm your host, Coach Justin Blackwell, and today I have a really, really special guest who has really just an amazing background and story, and I'm super excited to dive in. So before we even dive in, I want to give what I've discovered, and we'll discover more together through this podcast. But first of all, Greg is on the call. His name is Greg Dolbashian. Excuse me, make sure I don't butcher that. But I know Greg, and we'll touch a little bit upon this because I think this is going to be an interesting starting point. But you were born in New York, right? You debuted your own company, your own dance company, which is the DASH Ensemble. Looks like December 2010 at the Joyce in Soho, right? You have, so many performance credits, right? The Joyce Theater, the Baryshnikov Arts Center, New York Live Arts. I mean, the list goes on here. And then also in partnership with dance education specialist Lindsey Pettus, also the co-founder of the DASH Academy. And that's one that I really want to dive into. And I could keep going on, but I think it deserves better explanation from you. But Greg, first and foremost, you're coming in from Plano, correct?
Yes, I'm broadcasting live from Texas.
That's right from Texas.
Yeah.
Greg, obviously we've already started our chat, but man, I'm super excited to have you, and I appreciate you, and thank you for joining me, brother.
Justin, it's a pleasure to be on the platform. I am excited to be a part of this, especially as it's early on in the inception of you crafting this as well. Really happy to chop it up and get into all this. I think it's such a great resource that you're trying to build for people.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And like I kind of discussed with you before we hopped on air, this is a really special episode for me for two real reasons, right? Number one, Coach Lowe is on episode 3, and she spoke very highly of you on that episode. And we talked about how, she had just connected us and that we had planned to have you on the podcast. So that's already, point number one. But point number 2 is that, my original idea with this podcast was that I would start with boxing coaches. That's my world. That's, just sports fitness, group fitness. But that I wanted to expand and go to, instructors and teachers of not just boxing, but other combat sports and other modalities of fitness and other modalities of movement. And so with you being the first step in my first foray into really, stepping outside of that box, it's super exciting for me. And so I think the best place to start with this, and I've been doing this with every guest so far, is just, first of all, letting people know who you are. So I want to start as early as you want to start. Like, who is Greg? Where did you grow up? How was life like growing up?
Sure.
Just kind of bring us into your world and influences as you were young.
Sure. Wow. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm a born and raised New Yorker. New York has been my home. And I think even though I'm living down here in Dallas, Texas, more so much of my home is still a part of New York. All my family is there. lots of kids I grew up with. I mean, we big kids now, but lots of kids I grew up with are still there. And fortunately, my life and my work still brings me back there. So I feel like I kind of have a very cool balance right now of kind of a new home base and new headquarters in Dallas, Texas. And the vibe and energy here is unique to this city and this region. And then getting the chance to still have so much of my life in New York, where again, the vibe and the energy is really particular to that region as well. And getting the chance to kind of live in both is a really special opportunity and balance. One that I think I'm still kind of learning how to hold and operate, to be quite honest with you, but
Right.
Really blessed to have that opportunity to learn and develop holding that. I grew up in a household of artists. Both my parents are performing and working artists. My mom's an opera singer and voice teacher, and my father was a percussionist and drummer for a very long time.
Right.
He's also a native New Yorker. So I was really fortunate that art and art making and art hustling was something that I was very up close to as a child, and also was lucky to have a lot of energetic and moral and intellectual support when choosing to want to pursue creativity and art at an early age. Music was the first thing that me and my brothers all learned. I have two brothers. I'm the oldest of three. We all learned how to read music and play instruments first in some form or fashion. And then all of that started to kind of fork out into other things. I was heavy into theater and performing, and was kind of like a child actor in New York and doing the full hustle with agents and managers, and working in plays, working in commercial acting, lots of stuff like that. And through performing that way, I started to get more exposed to dance, specifically through a lot of musical theater work that I was doing. I was dancing in a lot of those shows, but wasn't training at all, had no idea that there was even an aspect of strong physical and technical training that goes into it. I always thought, well, if you were just coordinated and smart, then you learn the choreography if you're in a situation where choreography is being taught, and then that's it. Right. And so the more that I was getting the opportunity to dance and being exposed to the art form of dance, I was really drawn to it. I was drawn to it as an art form, but I think I was also drawn to a lot of the figures and people that were also a part of my initial introductions into it. I thought that dance artists and dance creators were really fascinating and hardworking and unique people. I also felt like it was an art form that was bringing a lot of backgrounds and a lot of perspectives under one roof. And coming from New York, that was something that I felt very akin to, and felt really at home in.
I don't mean to cut you off, Greg, but man, you're just, the way you're talking about right now, I can just feel your passion for this as you.
You should cut me off too, because I will just go. So I need that sometimes too.
I got your back. Yeah, and I don't plan on doing it much. At the end of the day, this is about you.
Don't be shy too. You got, yo, Greg, we need to.
That's right. Yeah. But yeah, I want you to go back a little bit for me. So two things. Yeah. So as soon as I found out you were from New York, the one thing I was thinking to myself before we even hopped on and started chatting was just like, I wonder how just New York just influenced you, right? Because New York, when I think about New York, I think about culture. Like I'm from LA and I've never been to New York, admittedly. But I know a lot of people from New York, and everybody that knows somebody from New York knows the culture that they bring. You got to
experience fight. You got to experience fight culture in New York, yo.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I planned on going, and then the pandemic got me. I was actually getting ready to try to take a trip out there, but it is on the agenda. But tell me a little bit more. Just dive a little bit deeper as to some of the things you were experiencing in New York. Obviously, you mentioned some of the characters that were around you, but talk a little bit deeper about some of those important moments as a child for me.
Well, I consider myself, and when I use this word, I hope it doesn't take on the wrong connotations. I consider myself very beneficial, very privileged to be growing up in that city, because you have access to anything that you could imagine. The second that your parents take you outside, you are around shit. You are around so much stuff. And so much so to the point where I think I really took a lot of that for granted it wasn't until I started traveling a lot for work as an adult and working in lots of other regions and working with lots of other young people in many other regions where I was like, oh, like there are things that like we just have access to different types of opportunities and culture, and just your proximity to a lot of these things is just that much more closer. And I think I really didn't understand and appreciate the value of all of that because you're so in it and it's a part of you and it's your home. So you don't
It's just
think
life.
about you don't think about, to the point where you got to be careful coming from there. You can get complacent because you aren't there like trying to get on and put on because you think you're already kind of there, right? And then
Right.
the more, actually, sometimes what started to motivate me from a competitive side was encountering more and more people that were coming to New York to like seek their goal or their quest or their dream, and them coming through with so much gas in the tank. And I felt like, oh shit, like I need to come double that because I have no excuses. I'm from here and I have every resource available to me in my backyard. And I've made so many relationships over the course of time. Like, let me go extra hard because I feel like I almost have a responsibility to, because I got to grow up in these streets and I'm very fortunate to have had that opportunity.
Right.
So I think that
It's
momentum of New York is a big part of it. Like there's a special energy in those streets. And I think it gets kind of a funny rap in the everybody says it's so tough and mean, but actually anybody that's from there are some of the nicest people you're ever going to meet. Like we want you to have a good experience in these streets. Like if you're lost or you're looking for something, like we want to help you. Like
right.
if you're coming through, like we want to connect with you. And I think anybody that's from there has a lot of pride in being from there. So they want positivity to come to anybody that's experiencing it for the first time or is new or is trying to find their way there in some capacity.
That's so
And
funny.
I think I
Yeah.
learned a lot about generosity because of that. And that's something that is really a part of my teaching and my approach to anything I try to do is just the level of generosity in help and support. Um,
Right.
I
Yeah.
think
It's
so.
interesting. It's interesting you say that because I think the same is true for like native Angelinos, right? Oftentimes when you live in a big city, you get confused with the implants of the city, right? And so if you're
Yes,
new to the city, everybody's an Angelino, everybody's a New Yorker, but that's not necessarily true. Like if you're from LA, you have a very specific culture and way that you view your city and the pride that you have in the place that you come from, as opposed to, you know, some implants. We're not going to say everybody, but you know, some implants
for
who
sure.
come in and like you said, they're almost coming in with that, you know, I guess what we would, one of the YouTubes I follow is I think it's immigrant mindset or something along those lines, right? But they're almost coming in as a foreigner to the land, right? And they're coming in with one mission, and that is to succeed. And so and that can be super positive, but that can also be super negative at times, right? Depending on where you're at in that cycle and who that person is. But I totally understand what you're saying in regards to, also feeling kind of a sense of complacency because you're from the city where all the stars or all the celebrities or all the successful people are at. You're amongst them. You're rubbing shoulders with them, and now you have
Yeah,
to
man.
really have those reality checks at times.
Even like little things like, oh, I could get anywhere at any time of day or night, no problem. Oh, like I could grab something to eat and it's going to be dope at any time of day or night, no matter what. Just like lots of those things that you just have at your disposal that you kind of forget that, like, hey, the rest of the 50 states doesn't all move like this.
I know you
Um,
New Yorkers be mad when you come out to LA because you know our clubs close at 2, and we ain't got any of that stuff at 4 in the
I
morning. You
know,
know?
right? Well, because there's good eats to be had out there in LA too. So, we
Yep,
got a nose for it at all hours. Like,
that's right. Cool. So take me into now. Obviously, we went a little bit into your background, but talk to me about the beginning of like dance for you, because obviously this ends
sure.
up being a big piece of who you are and who you become and the things that you've done in your industry. But talk to me about the beginning stages of that. How did that evolve?
That's awesome. So I was about 17, turning 18 when I had been sort of like loosely on the outside of dance, I feel like before this, like I said, like I had participated in the performance of dance sequences and dance numbers in different like musicals and more sort of commercial productions of things. I had taken like a random class here and there around New York.
Right.
Um,
It was constantly pulling you, it sounds like, just here and there, constantly kind of pulling at you.
yeah, it was like there, and that was at a time when I was really just like the way athletes might be 3 and 4 sport athletes during like their teenage years and college years, even where it's like season to season. I was kind of that way with forms of art in terms of working in theater and working in dance and working with instruments um, and still playing a lot of sports too. I'm a massive sports fan and loved just being athletic. I think that's why dance was such a cool thing because it really brought both of those pillars under one house, kind of.
Right. That's so
Um,
true.
and so I was at a summer festival. It was a program actually called Perry Mansfield in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Really beautiful program. If you're into looking for a developmental program outside of a city setting, I highly recommend it.
Okay,
Perry
what is it called again?
Mansfield. Perry Mansfield. It's two
Perry
last names
Mansfield.
of the founders of it. Um, and I was there as a theater major, and I was doing all these different Shakespeare shows and performing in all these different one act plays and all this. And there was a choreographer at the festival that was there creating a piece for the dance majors. He was a choreographer from Toronto Dance Theater, which is a really highly reputed contemporary dance company in Toronto. And he was looking for one actor to play a specific part in the piece that he was creating. That actor had to have some coordination and ability to move. I was like, this is fascinating. I'm going to go audition. I ended up getting casted in it. And so then I had to join the dance major at the festival for the 3 weeks of the process. So that looks like basically now stepping into multiple training classes in a day, multiple rehearsal processes, and stepping into it with lots of people that are at a high level that have been doing it for some time.
All right.
Which I was totally ignorant to and was just like, yeah, like, let's go. Like, I have no concept of any of this
No
structure other
fear.
than,
Right.
yeah,
Nothing.
just joy, right?
Yeah.
And even it being really hard, I was still kind of like, yeah, but I'm doing it. So like if it gets harder, that's cool. I think the only thing that would hurt the most is if I stopped doing this, right? If
Right.
I didn't show up. Um, that's one of the hardest mindsets to continue to maintain the more that you gain experience and progress, obviously. But
Expand
I,
on that a little bit.
well,
What do you mean by that? Like, just dive into that a little,
to keep with the
and we'll double
theme,
back to the Perry
yeah,
Mansfield.
yeah, no. To keep with the theme, like your coach's coach, like I feel like now I, as a coach, am seeking out a lot of coaching myself for the maintenance of my mind and my outlook towards my craft and towards how I want to continue to grow in it, how I want to conduct myself in it, and how I want to hold healthily the buildup of all the ups and downs that have come with pursuing this so vigorously.
Right.
And so I think that it's funny, like in the more that you gain and the more that you learn and the more experiences that you have, sometimes the scars I think can build up in ways that could get in your way if you're not careful with the work that you're doing and the awareness that you have in terms of what type of emotional weight you are also gaining as you continue to hustle and build. I think that that's not just iterative of the field of dance. I think that that's an entrepreneurial thing. I think that that's
Yeah.
small business ownership. I think that that's a lot of different areas of societal living can have these trappings, let's call them.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting on your end because what you're alluding to, well, really what you're saying pretty directly, actually, not alluding to, really is you're building a business, but at the same time, you're pulling along, all these trials and tribulations, the people that you're trying to educate and coach and foster great relationships and nurture. You're carrying this load. And so it sounds like at a certain point, you can either let that become the barrier where it's almost like I'm cool here. right?
Yeah.
Or do you seek outside, influences and inspiration and motivation to keep pushing through those next levels?
Yes, it's like it's a relationship with your fears, and I think paying attention to the value of that relationship. I think a lot of times we think about divorcing ourselves from fear, and that means that we've handled it. But the more that I am growing and just aging, I'm like, yo, I have actually been doing a lot of things while afraid a lot of the time. And that is a form of bravery and having a healthy relationship to those fears so that I don't hold back sometimes, or I don't continue to play it safe, or I don't avoid certain uncomfortable moments that will have good growth attached to them. However, they are uncomfortable. That's something that I'm really sort of paying a lot of attention to right now, both analytically and just emotionally as well.
For
Um,
sure. I want to get back to the Perry Masters. I want to go back to that piece of
yeah,
the journey, but I want to take what you just said actually even a step further, right? Really, there almost can't be bravery without the fear, right?
100%.
It's like, I mean, there has to be an element of fear in order for you to then be brave.
Well,
So
talk to
your point,
me.
like we can't divorce ourselves from that.
Talk to me about that relationship in the fighting context and one-on-one pugilistic activity where there's so much chaos and there's got to be so much fear in terms of taking on punishment, in terms of physical threat, and also whatever emotional threat is going on in the ring too.
Yeah, I mean,
What's the
for me,
prioritization? What's the prioritization towards staying incredibly calm and as comfortable as you can in that?
that's a great question. So let me be fully transparent. So I speak to the level that I've been at, right? I'm the guy that was in the
Yes.
gym sparring. I didn't compete at a high level or anything like that. I was the guy that was in the gym sparring. But when I first started even boxing, I did it out of being in the really dark place, right? In my personal
Mm,
life. I just found out I was a type 1 diabetic. I was transitioning
mm,
between jobs. I mean, just all types of
mm.
stuff was going on. So, anyways, I stepped into boxing. And the reason that I think boxing even called me personally was, I think, the same reason we all watch the Rocky montage, right? It's because we love to see that
Yeah.
hard work and that dedication. So, I say all that to kind of bring it back to your question, which is in boxing, uh, if you ever pay attention to the sport closely, you'll notice there's levels to this thing, right? You have your recreational boxers all the way up to the highest of high levels. But no matter who the boxer is, it always starts with uh, the beginning stages of obviously just learning fundamentals. You learn your technique. You root yourself in the foundation of the sport. That's the beginning of it, right? And then we go through, and I do have a psychology background, and so I love to use this term, right?
Oh,
Which is exposure therapy. That's really like you won't hear that in
mm,
boxing, but through my time in the sport and being around just really high level people, not just in boxing but in MMA, I've seen them do it. It's exposure therapy, and that might come through really hard training, right? That might come through,
mm,
sparring, and sparring is probably the biggest key to this because it's just like dance, right? You can do all the work in the gym you want to, but eventually you got to show it off, and you got to show that you can execute when it's game time. And but you don't do that, right? I imagine in dance you don't go right to Juilliard, right? You start at the little level, at the lower level of this thing, right? You might start at the local school or club, or forgive me for not using the right terms, but
no, no, no.
you
That's
you know what I'm
exactly.
saying, right? You go to
Yeah.
these you go through the lower level experience where you kind of build your confidence, and confidence is huge in boxing.
Yes.
You can see a fighter's career ruined, just not simply because not because he's physically damaged, but because he's emotionally or mentally
Yes.
damaged. Right? It's
Yes.
everything in boxing.
Yes.
And then
It
you work with
happens
them
in it happens in it happens in
in
our
dance
side
as
of things
well.
too, for
Oh,
sure.
for sure.
Yeah.
I imagine, right? And so what I do as a coach is I put him against an opponent that's at their level, and then we constantly, step by step, we increase the level of opponent, and hopefully we do that gradually enough that they never have a day that's too horrible, right? Where we emotionally damage them, but we challenge them. and they
Yeah.
see that they can improve, right? And so that's really what it is in boxing, is that we expose. You have to force yourself into the exposure therapy. You have to go into the sparring. You have to go into the hard training, but you do just enough so that when the big game day comes, when the big fight day comes, you've done enough work, not to necessarily not be scared, but to at least know that you put in enough work to hold your own, right? And then
Yes.
then you get there, the lights are on, and you know, if it's been done right, the fear goes out the window, and you're kind of just in almost reflex mode, fight or flight,
Yes.
right? And your
Yeah.
body goes to doing what it does, I imagine. And after it's done, right, you see them. It's almost like this weight has been lifted off their shoulders. It's
Yes.
such an
Yes.
amazing journey. But anyways, that was probably the wordiest way I could put it. But that's really what it boils down
No,
to, is
that's what it's.
this exposure therapy, incrementally building yourself up, your toughness, your skill level, your mentality, your confidence. We do these things incrementally, all in hopes that when we get to that actual engagement, that it all pays dividends. Yeah.
I feel
So
like what you're talking about is also just like good attentiveness to your preparation, and like
exactly.
really like prioritizing that and working to the level where your preparation has allowed you to be very free in the moment because you've memorized whatever sort of approach you're taking. You've memorized it in your DNA so
Yeah.
thoroughly that you've got the ability um, to be calm in all the chaos because your preparation is really on point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you'll hear this a lot, right? Boxing or any combat sport, but boxing is the one I watch the most and take part in the most. But you'll hear it all the time. It is a dance, right? And you'll
Yes.
hear phrases like he has a good dance partner. They had a good dance partner, made a great fight.
Yes.
At
Yes.
the end of the day, as a coach, I tell people all the time, really what we train is movement, right? I might teach you one punch. I teach you one punch, then I teach you another punch. I'm pretty sure it's very similar to dance, right? You have these specific moves that we do, and I don't teach you all of it. I teach you one piece at a time, and we master the movement. And once we have that, then we incorporate it into another set of movements that we might have already trained, and that's kind of the process that we go through. I
Yeah.
imagine it's similar with dance, right?
Yes. I mean, dance has so many styles and genres, and within all of those genres have their own approaches and their own curriculums and their own ways of being taught. There are lots of artists that want to specialize in one of those genres and really have that be the calling card for them. And then there's also other artists that pride themselves on versatility and really shoot to try to be as available and well versed in multiple genres and multiple styles. Because frankly, once you get into the profession, there's like this many available candidates and this many work opportunities. So the more things that you have under your belt and the more things that you can lend yourself to, and frankly, the more social networks that you've engaged in has a lot to do with then what your workflow is going to look like as a professional, especially as a working freelancer. Um, and as a teacher too, you're constantly also sort of like, okay, so for myself as an educator, I work in multiple forms of contemporary dance, which consists of teaching set choreography and vocabulary. It also consists of teaching different forms of improvisation and methods and creative tools so people can basically confidently move in freestyle form on their own. It involves teaching aspects of partnering and forms of contact where you're sharing and supporting weight and working intricately in attachment with others. Um,
Okay,
and
actually, let's go back, Greg,
yeah,
because I
go
think
ahead.
you're segueing perfectly. Um, and we'll double back to some other things if we can, but I don't want to abandon this piece of the conversation. So let's bring it a little bit further back, which is the beginning of
Yes.
Dash. Yeah, because I think I want to know, number one, why did you start Dash? What inspired you? What motivated you to, create your own company? Because like we just talked about, taking on that endeavor is no joke. The industry of dance, like you said, has so many dancers, but so, the opportunities are limited. So, but you decide, I'm going to take this on. I'm going into my own space and I'm going to
Yeah, right.
create this dance company. Talk to me
Yeah.
about that. And then, and I did, and then talk to me about, how you've developed your philosophies and the way that you kind of wanted to create your business in your dance company.
Sure. Okay, so I was fortunate enough to get to go to the Conservatory of Dance at SUNY Purchase, which is in upstate New York. It's one of the best conservatories in the whole 50 states. And I was very, very, very lucky and excited to be accepted into that because I had been training formally for a very, very short amount of time before I auditioned for that program. I actually took the whole year off after I graduated high school just to train because I was so late in entering into like formal, consistent, high level training that I felt like I
You had
needed
to
a
play
whole
catch up.
year to prepare before I took any auditions for any collegiate programs or anything like that.
Right.
Um,
And what did that training consist of in that year?
so in that year, I took at least two dance classes a day, one of them
Mm,
always being a ballet class. Ballet is kind of like the vitamins of all of dance. Like, no matter what style of dancing you're doing, even hip hop artists that I know have taken or trained some aspect in ballet work here and there. Um, it's kind of like as a musician, like you learn your scales and your all your rudiments. As an actor, you learn your basic vocal exercises and things, and ballet is kind of that as far as like helping to train certain aspects of the body to have the strength for movement, line, and shape. Um,
right.
so I would always take at least about because that was the thing that I was the most behind on, and also it's a technique that like by no means is everybody virtuosic in it, and not everybody is going to become a ballet dancer, but it's always included in every curriculum and every high level conservatory program. Lots of companies have it as a part of their training in some form or fashion.
Yeah. And is
Not
that
all,
because
but a
it's
lot.
is it because it's just such a classical form of the art? Like, is that what it is, or
It's
why is
interesting
it
because
so?
there's a lot of debate going. This is a kind of a hot topic right now as far as just like I think, as we're looking at decolonizing a lot of aspects of a lot of different things, this is one of the topics that's kind of under discussion right now is like,
Interesting.
why is the emphasis on this particular technique? Does it actually really show what you need to be seeing from a human being when you're looking at evaluating an artist's um, presence?
Right.
And but I think for the time being, it will always play a part in some way. It's like every rock star, every pop star probably learned some piece of classical music at some point in their instrumentation
Of
training,
course.
even as a kid. And so I think that's kind of a similar relationship and setup to this.
Okay.
Um, and it's one of those things that like if you really look at it for just knowledge and what it's kind of helping you with it does strangely enough it does lend itself to, for example, when I've been training in ballet consistently, which doesn't happen as often at this stage in my career. I'm also
Right.
performing and dancing less professionally anyway. I'm working a lot more to conceive and educate. I'm dancing a lot in my classes, but I'm not on stage nearly as much as I was
Right.
earlier in my life. But I can say that even now, like when I've taken a good amount of ballet over the course of several months, I can see and feel it in my body. Like I'm just a little more on my toes, right?
Right.
Footwork is better.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I don't, I'm not from, obviously I'm not from the dance world in that way. I've admired it over the years and so many different, like you said, styles of the art form. Um, but when I look at ballet, I've never tried it, but when I look at it, it looks like you need an immense amount of just physical strength. I mean, the one thing you always hear about is, the feet of a ballet dancer, right? And just how strong the toes are. I mean, just little things like
Yeah,
that, where if you've never done the movement, or you've never just done movement at a high level in general, it's hard to really comprehend and wrap your mind around some of the physical requirements of some of these dance forms. I mean, it's just crazy.
totally. And each one is so different. Like ballet is a super vertical style, right? Where really everybody's up, everybody's really held and placed, and it has a certain thing, right? But then you might get into other styles, even other forms of contemporary, and definitely other street styles for sure, that are much more grounded and much more rounded and have a whole different aesthetic. And that takes a totally different set of muscles, coordination, training, and endurance too.
Right.
And so but I think that dancers are hungry for physical information. So even if a dancer has never taken a particular technique before, they're going to show up into that class already with a hungry mind and um, uh, a want to process information quickly. Like we want to get it. Like if
Yeah.
there's a piece of information out there about how to move my body, we do want to know about it. Like we want to see how it works for us. And
And
so
was that a similar process when you were going it through that year? I imagine, because you were taking
yes,
ballet, but I imagine you were taking a bunch of different, styles of dance in that year,
I
right?
was. And I was kind of trying purposefully to use that as my year to like do every random thing I could because I had the time to. Like, everybody graduated and they went to college, and I was like, I'm gonna stay back in the city and dance, y'all. And they were like,
Yeah.
what?
To me, that
So,
sounds like a smart idea, though, right? To just take a year to kind of collect yourself before you go right into it. But I don't know.
yeah, I mean, it was one of those things that was kind of like chosen and forced on me a little bit because I hurt myself as well pretty early on because I had thrown myself into so many advanced level situations kind of unknowingly, and also because I was older and joining like developmental programs for adolescents and teens, but I was 17, 18. I technically should have been with 11 and 12-year olds with my level of experience,
And this is
but
something you
they
figured out in
wanted
hindsight, right?
but the schools wanted me to not feel out of place and awkward. So they put me with the peer groups of my age range so that I would be around um, peers. But everybody
Yeah.
was so advanced and just so much more experienced than me, which definitely increased my learning curve. But I think also I felt it was intense, yo. Like it was one of those
Yeah, that
things where like,
sounds good. What do you think
yeah,
about that? That's so interesting you bring that up, because I've been thinking through that, right? I have a 5-year-old, and I'm looking at different programs for him and a bunch of different martial arts. I've done
wow,
he's I got obviously I teach him boxing, but he's done wrestling recently. He's done uh what is he done? He's taekwondo. He's done gymnastics, right? He's done dance at school. Um,
cool.
but one of the things I always look at, I'm like, is it better to be with your peer group based on age? Or, and this is a hot topic in so many like circles, but
It
I'm
is,
curious to know
man.
your perspective.
We
Is it an
about,
age thing, or is it a skill level thing?
you know, I'm going to give the annoying answer and say that I do think it is a little case by case. I
Yeah.
feel like because we talk about this topic all the time in the academy right now
Right.
for Dash because we have lots of students, for example, like a lot of talented eighth graders, and we're always like, okay, should those guys be in the high school track now, or should that be a part of middle school and be at the top of that? And because we have a middle school section and a high school section as of
Okay.
now. Um, and so, but anyway, so we're always looking at this topic as well. I
Right.
think that for me at the time, it was very intimidating, and I did have some dread on the day to day. And though I will add that my learning curve jumped tremendously, and sticking out a few difficult moments definitely, I think, overall was a healthy trade-in for the growth and the development that I was not only experiencing, but also I was being introduced to the art form at such a high level with so many high caliber educators and people. So my dance knowledge early on was very high quality in terms of what I was fortunate enough to be receiving. And I think that that also helped accelerate my learning curve a bit as well. Um,
Yeah, and
Now,
you
don't get me
loved it,
wrong.
right? You
I did.
loved
I
what you
was
were
that
doing.
annoying person that was like first one there, last one to leave type shit. I
Yeah,
was asking tons of questions. I was showing up to classes that I wasn't even registered for so that I could like watch or hang or like be. I was definitely that person. Um,
yeah,
Partly because I was so anxious about being behind that I was also kind of like, yo, I want to close this gap as soon as possible. It doesn't work like that. You do need to have patience with the process.
right, right,
Um,
right.
but I was so, um, I'll use the word, I was almost a little like manic about it because
You were
I,
obsessed. Yeah,
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 and,
you had to be.
and I wanted to be them. Like the people that had a dope handle on everything, I was like, yo, I'm trying to flow like that. Like
That's
I'm
right.
really,
Yeah,
and so to get to be around that. Now, I think that I was lucky to also have, this is going back to the point that you were making about your son, because I also had really good and supportive parents, and I was very fortunate enough to have that. So when I was having trouble with dynamics in these moments of training, I could talk to them and they'd be like,
yeah,
yo, this is normal. You got to stick this out. Or yes, like try this, maybe think about this next time you're in there. And,
yeah.
just having those kinds of support systems in your life. And also had really fabulous teachers that were willing and patient as well. So I
Yeah,
felt like,
what a beautiful relationship you must have had with your parents. That they were artists, and you used a term earlier that I've never really heard before, but you called it a art hustle. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, and that's but which is such an interesting thing, right? Because you never really think about that. I used to, there was a period of time where I wanted to be in music myself, right? I wanted, when I was
mm,
coming in the 2000s, I wanted to be a hip hop artist, like most dudes. Um, and most people don't think of it like that. Hustling art is not the same as like hustling a basic product, right? It's something very ethereal about art because uh, you know it's very subjective, right? And
sure.
so being able to hustle that is a challenge, and some people really blow
Yes.
it out of the water. And I think to your point about the opportunities earlier, a lot of times it's a lot of people can't navigate that system of hustling themselves and their brand and their art, and it's a much different world than even myself, even I don't even understand all the depths of it, but then I think most people understand.
Well, and that's the ironic part about it too, is that going back to your question about how I started to build my own platform, that was actually one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to move in that direction, because quickly I saw that I was like, well, we're going to have to do something where we're getting to create our own opportunities, because there's only but so many opportunities out here and this many, like I was saying before, and this many qualified people. And so I was like, if we want to just even be in a situation where we're being active in the profession with the stuff that we like to do, we're going to have to start something.
Right.
Um, and choreography was the place in dance where I really found my spot, um, because I felt like I could bring all the other cool knowledge from performing as an actor and all the theater training I had, all the music training I had, all of the work that I had been doing as a performer in multiple mediums before. I felt like all of that converged in choreography and being able to create concepts and ideas and build productions and create worlds and help endow people with characters and development, and also it was a great way to interface with artists and literally start to invent and make things. And honestly, too, I still felt like a newcomer to dancing, even when I started choreographing and really sort of claiming that title and really trying to define that role for myself, to the point where I felt like my imagination could go a little farther than my body could. But I was finding and working with other people who had the abilities and the skills and the want and the desire to go to those far places that we were going in our imagination. And that's when I was really like, oh man, like this is it for sure. Like have to do this, have to do this. So
Okay, let me stop you here because you're hitting on a super cool topic right here that fascinates me. So talk to me about a little bit deeper about what that process was like as you go from dancer to now choreographer. And the reason I bring this up because, for me, I remember, the way I got into coaching, I never pursued it actually, right? So what happened was I was a member at a gym,
found you.
and the owner, was like, I think you should try, because we would have these conversations. He's like, I think you should try to coach. He was like, I'll give you a client. He gave me a client like 3 days later. That's my first time like really being a coach for somebody who's a paying customer. But I remember this transition of number one, still learning myself, right? But now I'm also coaching somebody, and there's a transition that has to happen where you have to where you have these ideas and you can see the vision, but you also have to close the gap a little bit, right? And so talk to me a little bit about that of going from, dancer and enthusiast and really high level just dancer into now being the choreographer and the visionary of the movement. Like, what is that like?
I'm really fortunate that all that started to happen within the structure of a really amazing training collegiate program, because
This was at SUNY?
yes, exactly.
Okay, cool.
Choreography is a part of the curriculum there. Everybody has to take it as a class.
Okay.
And there's multiple assignments that you have throughout it as you learn different compositional tools, ways of sequencing, ways of building a scene, ways of developing storylines and arcs, ways of generating movement, ways of building a phrase, ways of organizing a group in space. It's really like physical architecture, right?
Right.
And I was just, again, same kind of thing, just threw myself into that education super hard. And was one of those people that was like going to the nth degree with every assignment, like coming in with like a prop or a light, or like being like, oh, I recruited 2 people to come do this with me, even though it's a solo project. I actually got this group that I'm going to do, right? Like I was just,
you were about it. You're feeling that experimentation, that creativity in it, huh?
And I knew that I was in an environment where like we had every resource available to us to do that, like space, time, willing and talented participants, extra teachers and classes, and like people that you could like ask, hey, will you take a look at this and help me? Like, like you have to pay for all that stuff as soon as you get out of there, right? So, so I was like, gotta go hard, right? And I was really enjoying it. For example, like every senior has to create their own senior project. You build a concert with a group of your peers, right? And everybody creates their own piece, and then everybody has to dance a solo piece that's set on you by a professional choreographer. I did that senior thesis, and then right after that, because I was so hyped and so into it, I put up my own show in school and made 4 more new works in like a month, and then just held my own event and invited the entire university to come out. And that kind of kicked off a lot of stuff. And I really was like, okay, like this is how I'm going to enter into the field and into the city as soon as I get this diploma. And and also,
you already
man,
have that entrepreneurial like itch in you. You were like, I want to create things that people want to come and enjoy and experience.
Yes. And I felt like were able to have more say in what our progress and development was going to look like, because there was more decisions that we could make on our terms. I don't say that from a selfish place. I say that more from a place of, I think it's very important to create initiatives because I think it teaches us so much. And I also think that if you're fortunate enough to be pursuing something that you enjoy and invest your heart and passion into, having an opportunity to exist with a platform independently in that, I think really gives you a lot of just growth as a person. Like everything I've learned from doing this applies to anything. If I were to put all my dance work down today, I feel like all the skills and wonderful habits that I've picked up from it would translate into lots of different prospects.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely. So
I just felt like we had to try, man. Like, and at that time too, we're talking like 2006, 2007 time. And everything was much more kind of face to face, and you had to go to the spots. Like if I wanted people to see my material, I had to set up a meeting and show up and give my like DVD, you know?
right.
And like
You just hit me with nostalgia for a second. I feel you.
yeah. And there was something to that type of way of doing business that was really agreeable to me in those early phases. And I was really fortunate that a lot of people that are so talented that I really respect were really putting the batteries in my back, like, hey, you know, like you're actually like you could really do something with this. You know, if you continue to take this seriously, like you could do something with this, or I will go with you. Like I will if you're creating something, I want to be a part of it. And that encouragement and that support gave me a lot of confidence to just really continue to try. Um, and so we came up with the DASH. We call it
Yeah.
the DASH because you have your birth date, then you have your death date, and then the dash that's right in between those two things. To me, that's like the
Everything that
span of your
matters.
life. That's your life.
Right.
Life is the dash.
Oof,
And
that's
everything
beautiful.
that we make and create is centered around some form of the things that we see, experience, and live through. Um, Themes of love, loss, conflict, war, um, and most of all, like just interconnectivity. So that was the idea, and that was the platform, and um, and I knew that we had to start young and inexperienced because I knew that we were going to make a lot of mistakes. And I
Yeah.
wanted to be young and have time to make those mistakes and absorb them and learn from them and keep growing. I wasn't going to try to just like have maybe like one aspect of my career as a performer and then maybe like retire or something and then try to start a company or a school later in my life, because like I said, I just knew there'd be a lot of mistakes along the way, and I knew there'd be a lot of hardships along the way too. Um, and I just felt like that's going to need time. Like that's going to need time to iron itself out. That's going to need time to level off. We're going to need time to learn from these things and heal from these things and go
Yeah.
harder at them the next time. So
Yeah.
I
As I
started.
listen to your story, Greg, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
Wow, you're good. No,
I
no,
don't know
no.
if I have a feeling that one of the words that was probably associated with you a lot was initiative, right? You probably took a lot of initiative, right? And so uh, I imagine that's what Dash was about. You know, I'm just like that's from your story, but as you start to create Dash and you start to go heavy into this endeavor, talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges that you didn't expect that came up, but also talk to me a
Mm.
little bit about how that initiative, or any element of your character and who you are and the things that you did, also led you to some of the successes. Can you talk to me a little bit about both of those like unexpected surprises going into starting your own business and company, and also some of the highs that you had as well?
For sure. Um, I would say starting with challenges, again, it's always a numbers game. So even with having your own platform, you're always looking for opportunities for that platform. Yes, you can also self-produce every event that you create, but then that therein comes the challenge of like, what revenue streams are you generating in order to fund all of that, right?
Right.
And what type of outreach and development are you working on? Just that side of things alone is a full-time year-round job, and I think is something that is constantly evolving and constantly growing as far as what type of strategies you take if you're working to generate funding through grant work and governmental institutions and foundations, if you're working more from the private sector and you have a large donor base and a big following and fan base that's helping to always contribute to what you're doing. And also the side hustles that you've built, like the DASH is one component of the work that I do, in addition to our academy program, and in addition to another program that's been very important in New York City called the Playground NYC that I'm a co-founder of as well. So,
Yes, I did see a little bit about that.
so I think the challenges of keeping all these plates spinning is something that is ongoing, whether you're at the beginning stages or I think even as you get more established.
Right. And a big piece of that, and you kind of said it, right, which is really it's funding. And then you have to ask yourself, what business am I in? Which is kind of sounds like what you were trying to figure out. Am I in the business of promoting all the shows? Am I in the business
Yeah,
of, cultivating these dancers? Like, I imagine that's
totally.
kind of the constant struggle, right?
Totally. And I think, you start off trying to do it all, and you might even be able to pull it all off for a little bit. Um, but then you start to see like okay, like where are our yields kind of greater? Where are we seeing a little bit more returns? What seems to be more attractive, not just to us, but the people that we work with and the communities that we enter into? Like, what are people responding to positively, and what are people sort of not really attaching themselves to? Um,
Yeah. How do you
Teaching.
balance out? Sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Wow, no, go ahead. This is
Oh,
great.
I was just going to ask, how do you balance out, right? Because as I listen to you talk, I hear this passion for dance, and just like I can feel it, right? As we chat, which is an amazing thing. How do you balance out for yourself the passion of this art and these arts? I keep calling it this art, but like you said, there's so many facets to this. But how do you
Yes.
balance that passion with the business? How do you do that personally?
That was something that I was never good at until I started working with other partners that had better perspectives on certain things. For example, Lindsey, who you mentioned, who's also my life partner as well, um, came into starting this business with me with a lot of other realms of perspective to keep balance, because you do need both. Um, but I think that sometimes, because my passion is a big driving place for me, I would make some important decisions from the basis of what I was feeling passionate towards. And that may not always be the best move in certain moments, whether it's financial choices, whether it's um, commitment choices, whether it's having to kind of work and connect with artists and finding the right working relationships among your staffs and among your collaborators. Um,
Right.
so I've been lucky that, like, whether it's Lindsey or also just other great confidants and sort of consultants, if you will, that I've had in my camps, I think those people and those conversations have really helped balance my passion to be a bit more pinpointed, so that I'm not just shooting it everywhere and like hoping that like results happen, but
Right.
that we're a bit more direct about like, hey, if this is something that we're interested in, then like this is the routine that we need to put around it. This is the structure that you need to have around it. This is the way to go about it. So
Yeah.
your peoples and your team have a lot to do with a lot of stuff. Like
Right.
and
It
and
sounds
who
like
you're
they have to
seeking.
be, yeah, they have to be, you know, it's always the outside looking in. You need those people you trust that can give you the outside looking in those certain, it sounds
And
like
you
those
have to
certain
be
moments.
willing, and you have to be willing to let them in too. Like you have to be
Right.
willing to be like, yo, this is what I'm thinking. What do y'all think?
Right. And oh, and have
And
that vulnerable moment. Right.
yes, because a
Yeah.
lot of people might be like, yeah, that's not what we should be doing.
I know. I
And
know. I
sometimes
feel
that
that.
is helpful. And sometimes you're also like, okay, I still know and believe that this is. So I'm just going to give you a little time and patience to come around and then we're going to go. Right. So
Yeah.
it's always when to say when.
Do
Um,
you have an
but
example of a moment like that that you can share with us? If you don't, no worries. But I'm curious to know if there's like any moment like that that sticks out to you.
sure, I would say coming down here, man.
Oh, I'm
Lindsay,
glad you hit that. Yeah, talk to me about that.
yeah, Lindsay is based here. She's born and raised in Dallas, right? Now, she does a lot of work around the country as well as a dance educator and also has done a lot of work locally here in the southern region as a dance educator. She also
Right.
has a degree in child development and education.
Oh, I love to
Um,
hear it.
yes.
I was
And
just at an event for child development, so I got a chance to sit with some of them up at CSUN. And
amazing.
anybody that's in child development is usually a very passionate about that,
Oh,
that
yes.
stage of life for children. So I'm
Oh,
curious to know
yes.
so much more. But yeah, keep going. Again, I don't mean to
Yeah,
cut you
no,
off, but
that
you're just touching so
Lindsay
many
is,
buttons
nah,
for me
man.
that
No,
I
no,
want.
no. It's
I love
legit.
it.
Lindsay is the backbone of our academy program 100%.
Yeah.
And she's somebody that I met at a time when I was just starting to enter into more adolescent education. I had been working with young people, but it was probably, I would say, like late high school, college, and maybe some early high school. But even then, it was like, one off master classes or like, 1 week intensives. It wasn't that day in and day out grind like we're at the academy now, where it's a year round school program. Um,
Right.
and So basically, when I met Linz, I was just kind of starting out in working with more and more kids that were in like middle school and junior high and who were coming from lots of different dance backgrounds as well, in terms of what type of studios they were coming from and what types of training they were, what types of training they weren't getting. And she was really instrumental in my development as an educator. I say all this to say that fast forward to us building a relationship and then me reaching out to her after some time. We were working basically together for another company as educational consultants. And then we both concurrently left that company at the same time. And then I hit Lindsay up because I really felt like she was a big reason why that company was very successful in the first place. And I was like, yo, would you ever want to do some work with me? And she was like, I've been waiting for this call. And I was like, oh shit, okay, let's go. Like,
Right.
so
Right. Let's run that.
yeah. So then
Yeah.
basically, that was how we started developing all these educational branches off of our company and adding a pre-professional component to the already existing DASH Ensemble, which had gained a dope reputation, nationally recognized as a really cool, prominent project-based contemporary dance company.
Cool. And
So
so just to summarize and like give an overview, right? So Dash is your professional dance company. That's obviously um, like you said, that's who you're building out shows for. That's who you're trying to
yeah,
get actual work for this
yes,
group of professional dancers. You meet
yes,
Lindsay, and now
yes,
you guys start to really develop and hone in an academy pre-professional.
yes,
And are you doing this with the idea of like, okay, this academy will obviously keep giving us talent, but obviously Lindsay has a child development, so now it sounds like she's also thinking through how do we foster these children in a
yes.
better
And
way to lead them into this profession. Am I getting that kind of right?
100% you just nailed it.
Okay.
Um, and our goal is to cultivate really really developed pre-professional dance artists so that they can enter into many aspects of the field. It isn't just to feed into the dash. Frankly, we have a lot of nice inter sort of company relations anyway, as far as like our professional artists educate and teach the kids in the school. The kids in the school are learning some of the works and the pieces that already exist in the company. So they're getting some of that firsthand professional experience. But we're really trying to grow them so that they can enter into any high-level conservatory or college program that they wish to. They can enter into many different aspects of the field if they would want to. And just
So it sounds
really
like you're
trying.
extending the runway for them, essentially, right?
100%, 100%. That's what
Beautiful.
people did for us. So we got to do the same now that we're in these positions. I firmly
I love
believe
that.
that. The craft will never cheat you. So it's important to do things to pay homage as you can, and try to keep some of your missions aligned with knowing that like you're honoring the craft. Because I do believe in sort of some of that karma that like it does manifest and it does feed you if you're attentive to these things. I really believe that.
So take
Because
me
I've seen
deeper
it work the
into.
opposite. I've seen it work the opposite when you don't pay attention to those things too. So
Right, understood. Yeah, take me deeper into this newfound relationship with Lindsey. You guys connect.
yes,
Talk
okay.
to me a
So
little
then,
without giving any trade secrets or anything, of course. But
no.
how does
Totally,
this
totally.
actually manifest, and how do you create? Because creating something for adults and then creating something for children, even though it's in the same modalities and you know dance genre, right? Like
Yes,
we already talked about, there's layers to that, but now you're talking
yes.
about the difference between adults and creating a year-round curriculum for children. What is that piece of the journey like?
It's an awesome question. Um, and it's crazy because there are some things that are, I think, very particular to each. And then there are some beautiful places where they can cross over as well. And I
Yeah.
think kind of like Lindsey was the one that really pointed out the ladder to me. Like she was like, yo, like a lot of the things that you do at these levels, you can and should do over here with these kids. And let's talk about the delivery of it, or let's talk about the language that we use to introduce these things. Um, and honestly, when I approached Lindsey about working with me, in my mind, all of that was going to take place probably in New York. And she was the one that was like,
Right.
yo, I got a big twist for you with all these great ideas that you've got. And I was like, what is that? And she was like, you should do them down here. And I was like, huh? And she was like, we should set it up down here. She was like, because down here, I would say that the crown jewel of the dance scene in a lot of these southern cities and regions, but especially Texas, is the pre-professional developmental population. There are so many training grounds and training schools and kids dancing and training here, but there isn't necessarily a ton of professional outlets for them to enter into. So a lot of them either leave their home state to go someplace else, or they just stop dancing after they turn 18 and then go go take on another pursuit of some kind.
Right, because they
And
don't
so
want to. Maybe
Lindsey's
they don't want to leave the town, if
yeah, exactly.
or
So
the
Lindsey's
state,
whole thing
if you
was
will.
like, what if we created something that helped build more of a bridge for these guys to either A, feel really galvanized about staying in their home city after they train and grow, and like creating more of a professional scene here and starting more initiatives and creating companies and creating outlets. And also just giving these kids the tools and the layout of the options that are available to them as a profession. Because I think as you grow up in training, you don't even know totally what all's out there for you, like how many routes there actually are to take, how many different companies and homes and atmospheres might be the place for you. Because just like anything else, you got to kind of mine for it a little bit, and you need, as you so eloquently said, you need a runway for that stuff, and also learning how to sort of navigate a network through all of those things. Just a lot of stuff that doesn't even have anything to do with how you handle yourself in the studio, but has a lot to do with whether or not you get to spend time in a studio. So she was basically like, you should really consider doing that down here. So then in 2019, I basically did 2 weeks in New York and 2 weeks in Dallas every month for a whole year.
Mm.
And we were building the business. And then I was also continuing all the business and work and hustle in New York.
Yeah, that must have been a
Um,
draining time, though. I mean, you had to be burning at both ends, or
it
or
was
was it
crazy.
so exciting that it was invigorating?
It was kind of that. And also, man, I travel a lot for work, period. So sometimes it would be like I would do my 2 weeks in Dallas and then I would fly out to my next gig and like
Right.
do that gig. And then instead of going back to New York, I would just shoot back to Dallas for a few more days, do some more work with Linz, and then keep it moving to the next thing. So
So
I was
basically, it was
really
another day in the office at that point.
kind of, I mean, I, 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 I didn't have a true home base. I had a lot of places that I stayed,
Right.
um, and that was a super interesting sort of experience in and of itself. Again, having so much momentum, like literal physical momentum in my life, I think played a huge part in our creative output and our rate of execution in building the business because it all felt like it had momentum.
Right.
I would say that that's one of the biggest adjustments now to having now put some roots down here, and I have a little bit more of, dare I say, even a routinized life, and my day to day is a bit more regular. And that's honestly been a unique and both kind of welcomed and strange adjustment, actually, because for a while at first I was like, yo, actually having all this consistency, I don't know how to perform in this. I gotta
Right.
I gotta learn how to get my game and my routine right for this part of things too.
Right.
Um,
Right. Especially, I mean, you were, traveling, you're in dance, it's such a creative experience. Did that hamper your creativity at all? Starting to add
yes,
this routine? Is that
I think that at least I think I perceived it too, and then started to tell myself stories. Like I'm not going to sit here and say that that's actually what happened because I think
right, right.
this goes back to what we were talking about very early on about like how you're holding your emotional health through a lot of these advancements and changes and developments in your career.
Yeah.
Um, and so I had to be conscious of kind of like the perspective that I was taking as I started to um, settle into more and routinize into more. Um, and as we were talking about before, too, Texas and New York are two very contrasting environments, both offering a lot of cool things. But my life and energy and the way that I live in New York is different than down here too. So
Yeah, very different cultures. Right. I
yes,
mean,
and I
in
think
many ways, I imagine there may be some overlap, but from what we all know,
yeah,
just right,
totally,
New York and Texas is very different
totally,
place. Yeah,
totally.
yeah, for sure.
So trying to find, I think, your authenticity through all that and maintaining the things that are constant for you. Um, but at the same time, like sometimes the journey shows it to you as well. Like some of these things were definitely not part of my first vision, and I never foresaw like having a really cool, thriving school program in Dallas, Texas, while maintaining and engaging in all the other cool things I get to do. Um, and I felt like, yo, we should really just try to let this unfold because
Yeah.
it's moving in so many unique directions. And you know, we founded the school program itself during the pandemic in 2020, so it was a wild time in that first inception year of the program. Um, I feel like only now, in some ways, are we all really learning how to breathe with this thing and have it
Yeah.
operate not in sort of alternative or unique ways.
Yeah,
I
that
mean, we're
must have
always
been
trying to find that, but
insane opening
yeah, it was
during.
crazy. It
Right.
was
I mean,
crazy.
well, you're down in, I guess you're obviously going down to Texas. So, for again, I wasn't down there during the pandemic, but I have some folks down in,
Sure.
like down in McKinney and all that stuff, we
Yep.
chat, but
Not far from there at
it's
all.
right. So it's like, obviously they were doing things differently than we were doing out in California,
Yeah.
definitely up in New
Yes.
York. So what was it like, not just from, opening the school, but just as an entrepreneur mentally, you're navigating this, like, what was that period of time actually like?
Yo,
What
man,
were the things happening?
it was a total blur. And again, at the time when the pandemic first hit, I was in New York,
Right.
and New York really started to feel that whole thing first. I mean, I remember those early March days where we were like, yo, it was crazy over there. And again,
Right.
Lindsey was like, I think that you should consider placing yourself down here.
Right. She's like, I'm walking around right now just in
Yeah,
case
yeah,
you
yeah.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, I'm out and about. I don't know what else to tell
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I was like, man, I don't know. And she was like, look, like somebody in your family has to be agile, one. And two, she was like, this might be one of the best things for this business if you actually do that.
Right.
And I was like, shit, all right, fuck it. Like let's give that a go. So then I kind of relocated down to Dallas in March of 2020 and then slowly got on my feet, like got an apartment, got a car, and we were just preparing to launch the business. We were doing a bunch of different virtual activities throughout the first sort of summer, and then we launched the actual live in-person part of the program with 9 students. In Texas bylaws, you could operate in spaces with regulations with 10 or less people. And we built
And that
everything.
was COVID regulation at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we were able to operate safely in person starting in August of that year, 2020. Because our program is unique in that it houses both online academics and dance training and dance education. Because
Oh.
one of the things that was unique that we observed out here in the population of students, and again, this is something that Lindsey really put me onto, a lot of young people that are serious about their dance training are already doing some form of homeschooling already. Now, whether that's something that's just being administered at home with a parent, or if the kid is sort of left to their own devices to have to kind of navigate their online programs, we were like, what if we tried to create a program that supported their schoolwork just a little bit more, like put their online programs into a classroom setting, give them some support in addition to all the remote academic counselors that they have. What if we also are able to track some of their progress as well, keep track of their academics, chart where kids are struggling, try to figure out just ways to support this part of it.
Yeah. And so you're actually
And
attaching to their actual school curriculum.
yes, so
Oh,
we
wow.
basically
That's
act
interesting.
as like a bit of we're like a we're like a cut man in the ring. Like we help augment what's already going on. So, and we just put them in a setting where they're in a classroom setting with other peers also working on their school. Some of them have shared curriculum, so they're able to kind of like share assignments and share work. Um, and then when it comes to any type of writing, especially for all the application work that they have to do for their college prep, which is something that we're heavily involved in terms of their college application processes,
Yeah, that's cool.
that's something that we have a pretty strong hand in as well. Now, there's a lot that we are still developing and prototyping to make this part of it really effective. And there's
Yeah.
so much that we're seeing year to year in terms of approaches that work, approaches that aren't working, and also just the various needs that arise from different students depending on where they're at as well too. So
Yeah. I mean, what you're saying is just so fascinating because there's a lot going on in education right now, right? And I'm
yeah,
sure you are probably even more privy than I am. But I mean,
no, but you're so
and
right.
correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like so in dance, and I imagine is it because the kids travel a lot for dance that they're doing a lot of homeschooling, and then there's probably just a cultural aspect to this right now. There's a big wave and a big movement of homeschooling going on right now.
Yes,
And so what you guys decided to do, which sounds genius to me, which is like you take, you know, all this art form and these art forms of dance, right, and allow them to pursue that, And so they don't have to necessarily be in the school setting. You guys come in and create this kind of web of support for them to do that amongst peers, even if they're not necessarily on the exact same curriculum, though they could be, right? And
Yes.
you provide the support so that they can do this as well as at the same time pursue their passion of dance, which is amazing, and again, I'm not from that world of dance, so we don't even think these things, right? There's no support system like that for kids who want to go boxing, um, or any combat sport for that matter. But that's genius level thinking, the way I see it, because that's how you support kids and give them a positive lane to run down.
Fam, first of all, thank you. Second of all, you just basically summed all that up perfectly. Um,
Yeah,
I think it's really cool. These conversations are very cool for me because it's always a reminder of our whys, right? Like
right.
why we're doing certain things. Because I think it is possible to lose that compass um, within the hustle and just within kind of like the day to day. And I think that at times we underestimate how critical that sort of that compass part of your why really is, no matter what
Preach.
phase of it you are. And I think getting to have this conversation has already kind of like just thrown some light on that for me. And I was in therapy earlier today talking about this exact same thing. Um, it's funny. I always equate therapy to the corner in between rounds. Like I feel like when I'm out in life, that's when I'm in my rounds,
You're
and then
shaking
when
and
I
baking.
yeah, and then when I sit down for therapy, I feel like that's my corner man in between my round before I go back out again. Because
Yeah, yeah.
it does,
I mean, it's so valuable too, right? I was just
yeah,
talking, I told you we had Lo on for episode 3, and even she spoke about, she meets with a sports psychologist as she prepares for her
yes,
fight, right? And she's like, it doesn't sound necessary, but having that person in your corner, is just so valuable to help you work through, um, everything that's going on in your head, right?
yes,
And so I can imagine, just especially for you as a business owner, an entrepreneur, somebody with a phenomenal why, but so many moving parts to this. It probably
yes,
is just so valuable to you to have somebody kind of bounce those ideas, talk through it, say it out loud to somebody,
a
sounding board
hundred
it, right? Yeah,
percent.
yeah, yeah.
Especially being very forward facing, which is a lot of my roles as far as like being in large rooms in front of lots of people and me always articulating and communicating ideas and goals and wants and desires that we have for artists and collaborators and coworkers. And frankly, man, I found myself more and more feeling other struggles and other anxieties the more and more I've been in these forward facing situations, which I found strange because I have so much experience. And I was like, why is my uncomfortability increasing? So I felt like it was something that I wanted to dedicate time to unpacking and trying to develop tools for. And again, like kind of a go to the gym for my mind and my heart just as much as my body. Um,
Yeah.
and
And have you
yeah,
have you began to work, like figure out some of those elements for yourself in terms of, because I can imagine, and it's a phase that I'm starting to go into. I'm naturally not an on camera guy, right? Through my line of work, I've started to work on to the front of the camera. But even
sure.
now, as I try to increase my footprint, in the community of fitness and movement, I'm working through some of those things, right? How much do I want to put myself out there? How much do I want to unveil to the world about who I am and myself? And it's not like I'm
Yes.
hiding anything. It's just naturally how I've always been.
No, totally.
So, at the level that you're operating at, I can only imagine some of those layers that you're mentally working through. And I think sometimes when we see people who run businesses or run, any organization for that matter, we often see either just the beginning or we see the very end of it, but we rarely
Sure.
understand, like you said, the dash in between, right? So, I think that's
Cool.
so you're talking through some really cool things right now, right? Which is like the journey and the process of what happens to what you see as forward facing.
Yeah, yes. And I think that you can trick yourself sometimes when you're in the role of coaching and working in consulting and helping others to develop. You can trick yourself sometimes into thinking that you need to have the answer at all times and that you have to be somebody that already has a knowledge of everything. Um,
Right.
but I think that it's important that even as you grow in your positions of mentorship, that you still are asking lots of questions and that you're still really trying to lead from places of curiosity sometimes as opposed to just initiative. I think that's one thing, going back to that great compliment that you gave me. I think if there's one thing I've tried to do to continue to sort of hone my initiative is to be more inquisitive and stay more curious and ask more questions, including when I'm confronted with a problem that I'm supposed to come up with the solution for.
Yeah.
Usually, a lot of my go tos, if I really am good about it, is to keep asking lots of questions. Um,
Yeah. That's
and
so valuable
yeah,
that you
man,
said that. Just,
it's hard because your
um,
ego could really get in the way. Like you could get in your own way without even realizing it.
I
Um,
agree. I agree. Even just beginning of this year, like I had to tell myself, like I knew kind of the phase I was getting ready to go into, right? Some of the things that
mm,
I wanted to do this year. Um, and, I told myself two things. Number one, I was telling myself that 2024 is going to be a wild year. And I believe that the victory of 2024 will go to the people who learn themselves the best, right? Do you know who you are this year?
mm.
Because there's going to be a lot of chaos. There's going to be a lot of distractions this year. We know all the things that are coming up this year, right? And then
Mm,
there's all the things that we don't know are coming up. So I think this year is really about learning yourself, understanding who you are so that all the distractions won't be as distracting. And
that's
then I
nice.
also told myself,
I'm keeping that one. I'm
oh
keeping
man,
that
please
one.
do.
Thank you for
Please
that.
do.
That's nice.
And then number
Yeah.
two, I had to be willing and I had to be willing to put my ego away. And the first part of that is admitting that sometimes I have an ego. You know what I'm saying? Like I have to, in
Yeah,
order to
yeah.
be able to say like, I gotta drop my ego. I have to admit that like, that every now and then, bro, that ego comes up and you have to be willing to
Yes.
recognize it and check it. So as you say that, right? Like as you tell yourself, like as I move up this ladder and as I start to build this business and this vision, being willing and able to check your ego, man, is so valuable. And I think even just having this conversation with you is a testament to that, right? Because my ego wouldn't allow me on camera. Do I really want to start a podcast? But I knew what the vision was, right? I understand what the purpose is. I
Yeah.
understood like there's people out there that can just garner so much information from these conversations we have. Um, and so I've been able to do it so far, and I hope to keep that trend alive, man. But what you're saying just rings so true to me in where we're headed in this year.
Well, you feel incredibly natural on camera, man. So I think it's only going to progress positively for you the more reps you get and the more opportunities you give yourself. I think you're really starting to
I
step into a
appreciate
really
that.
cool calling for yourself. I'm really excited to see how this unfolds for you, and I'll just encourage you as you can to just give it as much time as it deserves. Like just
Yeah.
give it the time that you feel. Even like now, as you feel the momentum of it, and you're getting it off the ground, um, and you feel the motivation to that part may not always stay the same as you continue to progress. But I think that the things that keep you going are the commitments that you've made as a result of when you felt motivated, like the commitments that you've made to the vision, the long term process of this, the commitments that you've made to the goals that you see for yourself after your 100th episode or your 200th episode. And so I think that like
Yeah.
it's important that when we get into those times where we're really motivated, we pay attention to the commitments that we're making as a result of that motivation, because the commitments are the things that I think that keep you sticking with it, um, during the times when motivation may ebb and flow depending on just how you are energetically.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that first and foremost. I think it goes back to what you were saying about understanding your why.
Yeah.
right? And that's something you just, I'm going, I'm a few episodes in, and even in that short period of time, I've had to remind myself, be patient, right? Because
Yes.
this isn't about, for me, there's other things that I plan on releasing on this podcast in the months to come. But right now, as I said, the vision of the podcast is really just giving insight, like these conversations to coaches, not just coaches, but professionals, enthusiasts. It doesn't matter. I don't, if you garner some value from it, I'm talking to you, right? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, reminding yourself that why, because I think the why also gives you the patience, right? And I don't know if you felt that in your journey, but it gives me the patience to say, like, all that extra, the shining lights, they don't really matter right now, because as long as I know that the people who this is for are getting what it's for, then like the bells and whistles almost irrelevant at a certain point. Obviously, we want to progress, but
Sure.
I can be a little more patient.
Yeah. I and I think if you know that you're like, for me sometimes just me putting in consistent actions towards my practice or my business of the day, or like even if none of those pan out, right? I still feel actively better because I took the time to make those actions than if I like procrastinated on some shit, or told myself to wait a second until I had X, Y, and Z in place. Or like a lot of times, even just agreeing to do this, like coming off of the energy from this is already adding to my day and adding to my experience in what I'm doing. And so I think that the
I'm glad to hear
action,
that, brother.
yeah, man, the
Yeah.
action items are so important. And I find that um, if I start to get into weird ruts, or I start to feel, as you said, impatient about anything, I'm always like, okay, then let's go back to our like action items, and like what could we spend some time doing? Because also just then kind of shifts your mind too. Then you're like, oh yeah, like now I'm in some
Yeah.
other type of flow. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah,
like going back to your question earlier, you're talking about like, or asking about how, building confidence in boxers.
yes,
What's interesting enough is I actually trained my lady, Ritz is her name, and I trained her for her exhibition a few years back, right? So she
amazing.
actually she got a fight in, and we went through this process together. And funny because we just talked about it, as we get ready for Lowe's fight, it's coming up. And so
Yes,
uh but we talk
which
about
is
like,
so cool, man. She hyped for it. It's very cool.
she is low as and just, they'll know when they see her episode, if they haven't already seen it by this episode. But
Yeah,
she's a
yeah, yeah.
savage woman, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I've seen this process now a couple of times as you build those, as we see these fighters kind of go into this. And like you said, the action items are so important, not just because it redirects the mind, but because the completion of the action builds more confidence and momentum,
Yes.
right? And so that's what it is, right? Again, going back to your modality, which is dance, and all these facets of dance, which is like, as soon as you hit that move, especially if you've been struggling with it, the moment you hit that move, man, there's something there. There's some endorphin or some dopamine
Yes,
release
man.
that's insane,
And
um,
yes,
and it's
and
just a beautiful piece of
that
journey.
is our equity. Like that is the most valuable equity that we trade in. Even
Yeah,
even with any paycheck, anything that comes along with it, like I think that like that what you're talking about in terms of like the investments that you make in your actions that build up that equity inside of you, like that's really the thing that we are all pushing to be as wealthy with as we can be. And I
yeah,
think that a lot of times we forget that there are certain controllables that we do have on our side that we need to be conscious of, because we can actually pay into that equity on a consistent basis.
yeah, yeah.
Just a matter of
And
remembering
I don't know why this popped into my head. But as you're talking, I'm wondering, just because I can tell, again, just this whole conversation we've had, like your passion for, you know, the industry that you're in. And I don't know if the industry is probably the right term for it, but at least
it. No, it
dance
is.
and
Yeah,
is
it
it
is.
okay? So some people would say I don't have a passion for the industry, but I might have a passion for the art, right?
Yes.
But
I
you,
mean, if we're comparing the two, definitely I would
right?
say that it's more towards the art form than the industry itself.
Yeah,
But I think that, again, it's like we were talking about when we were talking about fear. We gotta have a relationship with the off-putting part too. Like,
That's right. They come hand in hand if we want to
yeah,
pursue it for our lives, right? But um, I guess what I was going to ask you is just in your history, you know, in dance, what have you noticed about the best educators and instructors? You know, are there some consistent themes
that's a
amongst those educators in your life that have kind of led you to this point of passion? Because we all know, like, you can have an educator in your life that, again, we talked about it, that isn't passionate, that isn't truly there to
sure,
assist. They may be there for a paycheck, and they can be dream killers. They could, you know, I heard a quote right before we hopped on that said, if you want to, if you want to kill a big dream, you know, share it with a small mind, right? And so, yeah, and that was so powerful to me. And I was just like, but that's what happens a lot of times is that we have, you know, kids, right? We work with kids. We see these big dreams. And then
yeah,
all of a sudden they come across the smallest of minds and that dream dies somewhere along the line, right? We've seen it happen. So, but fortunately for you, you've had some amazing educators in your journey. So talk to me a little
yeah,
bit about some of those consistencies and some of those memorable moments of like great education and just
for
fuel that you
sure,
received on the way up.
for sure. I would say two things stand out, and these are probably um, relatively traditional and or dare I say even cliche, but I think they are that for a reason. One was a lot of encouragement. Like if you came with a pitch for something, even if it was a highly delusional idea, being met with, well, why don't you give it a try and see what happens, is so different than like, I really don't think that that's for you.
For
Um,
sure.
and now, granted, the I think what goes one step further is like, why don't you try it and see what happens, and keep in mind X, Y, and Z. Um, but I think that that's also a really cool way of sort of encouraging somebody to do it, but you're not guaranteeing it one way or the other. It's not like, yes, you would be so excellent at it. Yes, I really think you'll be successful. It was like, well, why don't you just give it a try and see what happens? That type of open encouragement that
Right.
encourages you to not have any limitations, but also doesn't pressurize you with an outcome or a perceived result, just allows you to tackle something wholeheartedly and the chips will fall where they may, and it's totally in your control based on your effort, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And it's almost like, I think something you're saying, you know, at least it's kind of registering like that in my head is like, you need those people in your life, not to sell you a dream, but sometimes as you're coming up and you're still trying to find out who you are and what you want to do, you need those people that are like, they kind of give you permission. Right.
yeah,
And sometimes it's like a friend, and some people may hate that word, right? Permission. But you got to think about it. If you're a child coming up, you look to these authority figures in your life. And for somebody, like you said, to just say, hey, like, let's give it a shot, like, is
yes,
a big deal to somebody who just wants somebody to say, like, I want to
yeah,
give it a shot with you. Right.
yes. And I will say that on the teaching side of things, the hack on that is that like it also allows us to it gives somebody the opportunity to experience what it's like to take something seriously. Because I think
Yeah.
that like that's what separates it in terms of like, okay, let's give it a try and see what happens. You also see quickly that like giving it a try on a level that might have something profound happening as a result will probably only come from you taking it seriously. And I think there's a difference between taking what you do seriously and taking yourself too seriously. I don't think we need to be taking ourselves too seriously. I think it's all about taking what you do a little seriously.
I like
Um,
that.
so that's one that stands out to me. And also the good old fashioned accountability. Like somebody that's willing to keep you a little bit on track. Hey, I'm seeing this effort. I'm a little concerned. We'd like to see a little bit more here. Hey, the way you're talking about that, that might pollute you. You may want to consider looking at it like this. Hey, I need you to adhere to this and this and this and this. Not from a place of control, but again, from a place of really defining structure for you.
Guidance, framework.
Yes, expectations. Allowing you to to have a sense of that you are answering to things greater than you, and that you are constantly going to be a part of something where it's a bit bigger than just you. And so your attentiveness to your contribution to what it is that you're a part of is directly correlated to what it is that you're contributing to your own advancement as well.
Right.
And again, I think there's a way to express accountability through support and encouragement. And I think that there's a way to deliver real talk with warmth. But I think that it's important that that real talk still exists, because that is the thing that I think allows for a developing individual to really respect themselves in the act of what it is that they're doing, because you've taught them to respect everything else that's a part of it. So ideally, in turn, they would turn that treatment onto themselves and allow the respect that they have for what it is that they're doing to also really reflect on just really respecting their own work in what it is that they're doing too.
That's right.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
those two things were really important hallmarks for impressionable teachers that I've had, and definitely things that I strive to also hold up and echo as well. I don't know if I
For
always
sure.
achieve it on the dopest basis, but it's something I'm always striving for.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think any coach or trainer or instructor or educator should ever expect to be perfect. But I think the
Mm,
two things that you kind of rooted it in was, and this is something that I stand by as a coach. If I don't do it right, at minimum, I want to do it with integrity. You know what I mean? And that means I can be wrong, but I wasn't trying to lead you wrong, right?
yeah, yeah,
I did it
yeah,
with
yeah. Right,
integrity.
right.
I did it with purpose. I'm not always perfect.
God, that's a
I'm going to
nice.
give you my, right. I'm going to give you my
That's a
best as a
really
coach,
nice thought,
always.
Justin. That's a really nice thought.
Right.
Really nice
Yeah.
thought, man. That's a
And
really
so
nice.
I'm just kind of summarizing what you said, right? Like, and I think we're on the same page on that. It's just like, at the end of the day, accountability, like you said, real talk as an educator, as a coach, as a trainer, doesn't matter what you call yourself, right? But when you're guiding somebody, you got to be able to have that real talk. And I thought something that you just said there was so valuable too, which is like, I think it can be done with warmth, right? It can be done with empathy and
Yes.
compassion, but it has to be had. Real talk has to be had, and that's super valuable. And then, like you said, just opening the door to possibility, and I think that goes back to kind of what we said originally, which is like, on a selfish level, right? As a coach, when you allow that possibility, and then if they can achieve, that's a win-win for everybody involved, right? If you can be that conduit of exploration for, especially for youngsters, man. And that's a realm that I'm really going into, which is not only my kids, but training more kids. I think there's just so much value in education in so many different ways for kids, right? From dance to boxing to educational support, whether it's homeschool, I don't care what you're doing, right? But there's a big area of opportunity with kids, right? Because I personally believe, and maybe I'm only speaking for LA. I can't speak for any other city. I'm LAUSD. That's just where I come from. But there's a big area of opportunity in education, right? And I love hearing your story, just even about the way you came up in the schools that you went to, because when I grew up, I didn't even know those were available to kids. I didn't even know
Yeah.
you could go to a school for dance or a school for art and music. No idea, right? And so
Mhm.
just even putting that out there to me is just so amazing, because those
Cool.
opportunities are out there, and educators like yourself are out there that are creating these runways and these I don't even know what you would even call it. I guess just like
Bridges. Just trying to build bridges.
just bridges. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. Build bridges um, to opportunities that kids may not know are out there, man. So, anyways, I just want to say I rant sometimes. I commend you
No,
for what you're
man.
doing.
Salute.
I
I
think the one
appreciate it.
one last thing I really want to ask you is just like,
Yeah.
where do you see the future vision for the things that you have on the plate? Like, what can we expect from you, from Dash? And I don't say expect like we should have
Sure.
expectations, but what do you expect of yourself, I guess, in the next couple of years? Where would you like to take Dash and the Dash Academy in the next few years?
Well, definitely in the next few years, I'm excited to see DASH Academy graduates populating the next high-end programs collegiately, and also just populating great spots with great choreographers and great collaborators in the field. That's something that I think is just very special, and something that we're really, really, really shooting for as we continue to develop our programs and our curriculums for our students. Um,
Absolutely.
I'm really excited for the Dash to start to continue to tour a bit more and get back on the road and bring some of our productions into other cities and communities. We've been operating more down here in Dallas and doing a lot of performances and events down here. One, because this is a new home city for us, we felt like it was important to kind of put down pretty consistently here in the beginning.
Yeah, and
And
there's some people on here from Texas, so you feel free to let us know where you're at in Texas and where they can find you guys, and yeah,
very cool,
kick us
very
on
cool.
game.
That's amazing, man. And so I'm looking forward to trying to get us out and active a little bit more, and bringing our work to other places. Um, and I'm also just really excited to find more collaborators that are also creatives to bring dance into other mediums. Like, looking forward to linking up with more filmmakers, and looking forward to meeting up with more maybe fashion designers and craftsmen on that side of things. And um, even looking at more ways to do interesting research in terms of all the physical approaches to moving in dance, and the physical approaches to moving in combat sports or other things. Like, interdisciplinary work is a place that I'd really like to take our professional activities towards, both in maybe performative products, but also just in cool educational initiatives and research time, and um, maybe even some interesting, cool branding ideas, and all types of stuff. So this, to me, I was so stimulated and excited about, because this is, to me, a gateway into all that. And now we've just built another friendship too. So, like, this is ongoing too now. Like, so
Oh, without
it's
a
all
doubt,
it's
and I
all
mean,
up, bro. It's all up. Like,
yeah, and we're definitely going to talk. I mean, like I told you, I have some things that I haven't put out to the world yet in terms of some future plans, but we've kind of discussed a little bit
yeah,
about it, and so we're definitely going to have some conversations, and when the time is right, the people who are following the podcast, and hopefully it's so many more by that time, will be privy to some of the things that we're working on. But I
100%.
definitely see some great opportunities, and one thing I was going to tell you, and this is true of Lo, who is again our mutual friend.
Yes.
I love watching dancers go into combat sports because typically they're the best at it,
Yeah.
right?
That's
And
amazing.
it boils down to the footwork aspect of it, right? So I can see us in the future working some
I would
partnerships
love it,
where we're
man.
I
I
think it
would
would be
love it.
amazing to just do some things. Even if I come to Texas, I'll do a workshop for you. You let
Yes.
me
Hey,
know,
yo,
and
please,
we'll figure
please
some
let
stuff
me
out.
know. Please let me know if you're ever going to be in town, especially if you're seeing your people in McKinney or something. That's really not far from us at all. It's about 20 minutes away from where we are. So
Yeah.
definitely keep it. And same, when I'm in LA, we got to shake it. We got to dap up. We got to
Oh,
do that.
without a doubt, without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Say less.
Yeah. We
I'm
got to
out
do
here,
that.
yeah, for
Yeah. We
sure,
got to
man.
do that.
Well, with that
We got
said,
to
I
do
don't want to take up too much more of your time. Listen, I've
that.
had
No, this
such
has
an
been great.
interesting conversations, Greg. Like in these first few episodes, that I know that we're going to do some part twos and potentially part threes with things.
Cool.
So we'll be in contact.
Yeah,
But
man.
again,
Hit me up.
before we get out of here, tell everybody just like where they can find you. Like where, like give us the whole spiel of like what's the
For
website,
sure.
what's the Instagram, TikTok. I don't care. You share it. It's
For
your moment.
sure, for sure, for sure. So you can check out all of our company activity at our website, www.the-ensemble.org. You can find me on Instagram, just as my full name, at Gregory Dolbashian, also at the Dash Ensemble. And also another great resource to check out, at the Playground NYC. I'm real easy to find. I kind of have it that way on purpose. I'm always happy to connect, and looking forward to seeing who else is out there and who else is interested in the work that we do, and also just interested in making some form of creative advancement in whether that's education or performance. But yeah, please, anybody who benefits from this, I would love to know about it. So comment, reach out, connect with us. follow Justin's platform if you're not already. I think that also what's cool about this, Justin, is we can really start to invite some more of just dance followings and dance community people into getting involved with this platform as well too. So I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to
absolutely.
putting this out there.
Yeah, I mean, like I told you, I think it's just I have this belief, right, that we live in such an amazing time where like information isn't like gate kept like it
Yeah,
used to
no.
be. We can have a conversation. I can talk to Greg in Texas right now and just pick his brain about stuff, right? And
Yeah,
like having those like conversations is just it's such a powerful time for me. I think a lot of people are scared of the future, but I think the future looks so bright right now. There's a lot of dark spots in it, but there's a lot of light in it too. And I think we just got to keep seeking light, like you said, keep building bridges.
yeah.
And I hope we get some dancers to follow us. I hope you get some boxers to follow you
Yeah, man.
because I
Pretty
think,
cool.
I think there's so much power in not just one modality. I think there's so much
Totally.
beauty and so much story and so much depth and history in all these modalities of movement.
Totally.
That, I hope we inspire, one at a time. It's cool with me.
Yeah, man. Exactly. It only takes just one.
It only takes one. Greg, listen, thank you so much. I know it's late where you're at, man. It's
No,
probably got to be
man. This is
close to
great.
8 p.m. But we will do this again. And again, I'll put all your information in the bio once this goes up. But
Cool.
man, thank you so much for your time, your insight, your story, what you're doing down there with not just Dash, but the Academy. I think it's amazing stuff. Honestly, just mind blown about like that journey for you, man, and just excited to see what you do, in the near future.
Thank you, Justin. It was a pleasure to meet you, man. It was a pleasure to chop it up. And I got a new West Coast friend, man.
Oh, let's go, man. Same
Yeah.
down in Texas. I'm down there.
Yeah. Let's do it. That's what's up.
All right,
Let's
brother. I'm
do
going
it.
to go ahead and end this recording, but we'll stay on for just a
Okay,
quick
great.
second.
Okay,
All
cool.
right,
Sounds
everybody.
good.
Oh, make sure you guys like, subscribe, shared. Don't forget, thank you for tuning in and checking out this episode with Greg
Smash all those
Dolbashian
buttons, y'all. Smash all the
on Your
buttons.
Coach's Coach. Appreciate you all. Have a good one.